Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch by interviewing authors, discussing their books, learning about the writing process, and even, on occasion, chatting live with a panel of authors to discuss topics relevant to both readers and writers. My guest today on the Online for Authors podcast is Sheila Athens, author of the book Neena Lee is Seeing Things. In my book review, I stated Neena Lee is Seeing Things is a contemporary Southern fiction looking back at the marriage of John F. Kennedy Jr. to Carolyn in 1996 and their death in a plane crash in 1999 through the eyes of a journalist, Neena Lee. Neena has suffered loss and holds herself responsible. Her latest loss left her hospitalized in a mental health facility and without a job. She needs to write this article about John Jr. to prove her abilities and save herself financially. However, when she sees John Jr. standing in the church, she is sure that her mental illness has taken a turn for the worse. I enjoyed how Sheila connects those visiting the island today with issues Neena and or John need to face. I thoroughly enjoyed this read. Today on the Online for Authors podcast, I'm chatting with Sheila Athens, author of Neena Lee is Seeing Things. Welcome, Sheila.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm really excited to have you. But before we really get into your book and all that's going on, let's give everyone just like the elevator pitch. What is Neena Lee is Seeing Things about?
It's about a 56-year-old travel writer who's really down on her luck, but she finally gets an assignment, and it's to go to Cumberland Island, which is the remote Georgia island where John F. Kennedy Jr. was married. Okay. And while she's there, she runs into his ghost, who's asking for her help. But it turns out Neena Lee needs his help as well.
Right. I loved that aspect of the book, the idea that it starts one way, and then not only does Neena need his help, but she also helps other people along the way. So she's kind of helping herself, helping him, helping herself. I loved the way that worked.
Thank you.
Why a story with John F. Kennedy Jr.?
So there was a period of time where I was deciding what my next book was going to be about. And my friend Sarah Pinner had just sold her book called The Lost Apothecary, which is a fabulous book. You should read it or listen to it if you haven't. She had just sold her book to a publisher, and it wasn't even out yet. It had just sold. But it was already selling into a lot of foreign countries too. So they knew it was going to be a success. And when it did come out, it was a New York Times bestseller. So, all that right. Came to fruition. But I loved the fact that it had like one sentence that really caught your attention. And that one sentence is, it's about an 1800s apothecary that will only sell tinctures to women who want to poison their husbands. And I thought, what, immediately that grabs you. And I kind of like a little bit otherworldliness of it as well. So I was, spending time kind of thinking about what was my next book going to be about. And I wanted it to have kind of that sorry about the cat, that kind of otherworldliness sense to it. And I live in North Florida, right on the Florida-Georgia border.
Okay.
And Cumberland Island is the first island when you get north of Florida. It's off the Georgia coast.
Okay.
And I was driving down the road one day, and there's Cumberland Island, and it's where John F. Kennedy Jr. was married. So if you're around here, you can't think of Cumberland Island without thinking of John F. Kennedy Jr. And so I'm thinking, I wonder if his ghost ever comes back there. And I'm not even sure I believe in ghosts, but writers' minds kind of
right. Oh, I know.
And I thought, I wonder if his ghost ever comes back there. And that's kind of where it started, because I'm like, that's the kind of otherworldly kind of one sentence, thing that I want to promote my book. So it kind of grew from there.
I love that. And I like how you do a lot of what I do, where you see something that's pretty standard and everyday. You know, for those people who live in your area, driving by Cumberland Island is not an uncommon thing, or seeing a sign is not uncommon, but you didn't stop there. You did the I wonder if.
Right.
You
Right.
know, and I've done that before, where, you know, like I had an idea for a book that came from a song, and the song said if we only had 5 more minutes, and they meant 5 more minutes to kiss his girlfriend and 5 more minutes with his grandfather, those kinds of things. And then I thought, well, what would you do if you had 5 minutes? Well, what would you do if you had a day? What if
Right.
it was 30 days? Like, and then my mind started swirling. And so I love that's what you did, was you took something relatively common and then went, I wonder if, and then went from there. So fantastic. Um, I noticed that the genre, they say, is women's fiction, but it's also historical fiction. And then it's got a little bit of like the ghost story and a little bit of romance in it. When you were writing, did you have a genre in mind, or did you write your story?
Well, let me back up. I don't know that it's historical fiction. Yes, it has the ghost of JFK Jr., but he appears in the present day.
Right,
So
right,
in a way, it's kind of historical fiction, but none of it takes place in the past. It all takes
right,
place in the present day.
right.
Um, and the one genre that you left out is Southern fiction. Uh,
Okay, Southern fiction.
and the reason that I point that out is because that's probably what I had in my mind most of all,
Okay.
as I was writing it.
So when you're writing Southern fiction, does Southern fiction have a particular trope that goes with it? Like some genres, there's certain things that have to happen. You know, like if you're writing a romance, there's certain things that have to happen. And if you're writing a romantic comedy, there's certain things. Is that true with Southern fiction? Or does Southern fiction just mean it's fiction in the South?
I think Southern fiction, I would say, and this is just my opinion,
Yeah, no,
I
no,
would
that's
say there aren't, specific conventions of the genre that have to happen, like certain beats that have to
right,
happen.
right.
But I think it has a certain feel. It has kind of quirky characters, and it tends to be fairly atmospheric, um,
Okay,
uh, and that kind of thing. You know, uh, the books that I think most closely relate to Neena Lee is Saying Things are Karen White's Trad Street series. She wrote
okay,
The House on Trad Street, which became a whole series because it was so successful. And they're set in Charleston, and there's a ghost. So
okay.
not all Southern fiction has to have ghosts, but um, I think there's a broad range of Southern fiction.
All right.
Kind of about the feel.
Right, right. I just reading it, it was hard for me to place it. Like personally, like which genre would I put it in? And all of these kind of came up because there's a little bit of romance, but it doesn't really follow the romance trope. But there is a little bit of romance there, right? And the ghost kind of otherworldly whole piece is there. And I know you say there's no historical fiction, yet despite it not happening in the past, there's a lot of flashback to the past in terms of like you learn a lot about what was happening that those few days that John F. Kennedy Jr. was there being married. And
Right,
so there is that historical aspect to
right,
it.
right,
There's the women's fiction aspect to it in terms of you have a protagonist that's female, and you see a growth where she goes from one place to another place. You know, she doesn't just remain a static person. So yeah, there's a lot of genre in there. So
right,
you have a lot of different ways that you can market this book.
right. Well, and my first book was a romance called The
Okay.
Truth About Love. And I truthfully think I'm incapable of writing a book that doesn't have a cute guy in it.
I
Go-
love that.
Going back to my romance roots. And I like romance novels, but I just felt like the stories swirling around in my head kind of needed a bigger canvas than a romance novel. A
Right.
romance novel is very tightly focused on the love story, and my stories are not tightly focused on the love story, but the love story exists. I
Yes.
guess it's a good
Yeah.
way to
Yeah.
say it.
I tell people that I think there's a difference between a romance and a love story. So I think there are a lot of books out there that don't meet the romance trope, but
Right,
there is a beautiful love story involved.
right,
And
right.
it's interesting. My second book actually won like military romance in one of these awards, and it's not a romance. There's a beautiful love story, but it isn't really a romance.
Yeah,
But I don't know that everyone quite understands what genres go with what
right.
aspects,
I've
right?
had kind of a surprise like that too. For example, I recently discovered that the local chapter of what is it? The National Alliance of Mental Illness
Mm-hmm.
is reading my book as their book club pick for one of the months later in the year because Neena she has panic attacks, she
Right.
has anxiety, she's dealing with some fairly serious um, things in her life. She feels like she should have been able to save two family members who had passed away before. And I'm honored that so many people, including this local chapter of the Mental Health Alliance, um, believe that I did a good job with the mental illness aspects of it. And,
Right.
and I didn't set out really to write a book, that focused a lot on mental illness, but again, kind of a surprise that
Right. Right.
people said that I handled that well.
I'm curious, are you a plotter? Did you know where this story was going? Or are you more of a pantser where you just kind of started writing and were surprised where the story went?
I'm very much a plotter. I call it a
Okay.
planner.
Okay.
And I'm very much a planner for two reasons. One
Hmm.
is I had a full-time job and was raising, along with my husband, two tweens when I started writing. And so my writing time was 4:30 to 6 in the morning.
And
And
you needed to make the most of it.
I learned that if I didn't know what I was going to write, I just sat there at the keyboard and, stared at the keyboard and
Right.
wasn't productive. So that was the first thing that made me a planner. And then the second thing was, I am a former book coach. I studied under Jenny Nash with Author Accelerator back in the days, the early days before her How to Be a Book Coach class even existed. And she teaches a method called the inside outline, which is an outline that focuses both on the story events and what's going on inside the character, the protagonist, which
Okay.
is called
Yeah.
the inside outline.
Yeah.
And that's such a great tool. And once I learned that tool, it's like, I don't understand why people would pants. I mean, I know that there are people that's how their brains work, but I want to be more efficient. I don't want to write 20,000 words that end up not working out and then I throw them away. I want to
Right.
know what I'm writing and know that my words are going to appear in the book.
Yeah. No, I understand. I am a pantser. I've tried lots of different planning methods. I haven't found one that works for me. I feel like my characters kind of stand in the background with their arms crossed and say, we're not participating.
Yeah.
We'll let you know when you're done playing around with your little outline, let me know because we have things to do over here. I don't know. That's the way my mind works.
Yeah.
I talked with a really good friend though, and she believes that I plan, but I plan after my first draft.
Right.
So I have now a first draft and then I go through and it's like, okay, I need more action here. I need less here. I need this to be somewhere else. I need to, so I kind of like get the story out and then I have to go back and turn it into something that anyone would read. And you just do it on the other end. So,
Right. And
yeah.
I agree. The same activities take place. They just take place
Yes.
in different
In,
order.
in different orders. Right. Right. So you say you're not sure you believe in ghosts. So what made you decide that a ghost, I mean, I know you had that little thought that came through, but what made you stick with that? I would think that you would either really, really believe in ghosts or you've had some experience with them or something in order to want to write that. So I'm curious what the thought process was that made you say, oh yeah, I think I'll do a ghost story.
So there are two answers to that question.
Okay.
But, I have trouble calling this a ghost story. I mean, yes, it has a ghost, but when I think of ghost stories, I think of like, I don't know, scary ghost stories.
Spooky. Yeah. Yeah.
And the ghost here is John F. Kennedy Jr., who is very charming and very handsome. So, it's the opposite of a scary ghost story.
Right. Right.
Um, uh, but while I'm not sure I believe in ghosts, I believe that the universe offers us up messages.
Okay.
I think we've all been in situations where messages were offered up to us.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. I would have believed that anyway, and then this happened. So my husband was born on July 16th. He died 3 years ago after a 2-year battle with cancer. He died on July 16th. So he died on his birthday.
Uh-huh.
And there was, with any book and any author, there's a period of time where they think, oh, my book's great, or my book's good anyway. This is a book worth writing. And then they'll sink into, oh, this book is horrible. And then they'll be back at, oh, this book's not bad. And then they'll sink into the, oh, this book is horrible. And I was in one of those, oh, this book is horrible. This is kind of like so far-fetched that no one's ever going to believe it. But I was doing some research online, probably just killing time. And I realized because of that research that John F. Kennedy Jr.'s plane crash and his death were on July 16th. And I thought, wow, that is a sign from the universe that I was meant to write this book.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know what you mean about signs because I feel like I get them. And sometimes it's as simple as you just happen to open up your, Facebook and somebody's meme like almost punches you in the chest.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I needed to hear that today. So I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had a similar incident. I was in my early 40s when I decided that I wanted to write novels. And it just kind of like came in a flash of an idea. And I told my husband and he was supportive, but he didn't tell me like quit your job or anything like that. But, the very next morning I was driving to work and listening to NPR, and there was an advertisement for a writers festival taking place that weekend about 20 minutes from my house. And I'm like, a sign from the universe.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I definitely agree with that. Let's look at research just a little bit. So you live in the area, and so you already knew a little bit about the fact that, this is where John Jr. was married. What other research did you have to do to make the story accurate?
A couple of things. First of all, I had never been to Cumberland Island when I had this idea. It takes some planning to go to Cumberland Island because I live in Florida, and it's the first island once you cross over into Georgia. So not very far, like 20 miles, maybe.
Right.
But I've never been there because it's accessible only by ferry, and you have to make reservations in advance on the ferry that's run by the National Park Service. And if you go over there, it's I think 17 miles long and 4 miles wide or something like that. And so you go over there and you get across on this ferry, and then you're on this island for the day. And this is Florida and Georgia, and it's like 1,000 degrees in the summer. So
right.
What do you do once you get there? Other than you can hike a little bit, but you can't hike all day in the kind of heat
in that heat. Right.
And so I just never gotten around to going. And so when I decided to write this story, I scheduled a trip where I took the ferry over, and then they have one concessionaire who does what's called a land and legacy tour, where you get in a van and they drive you around the island, which is the only way you could see the island in a day because you couldn't hike it in a day.
No, not 17 miles of island. No.
And so I got in the van, and they took us to the church where John F. Kennedy Jr. was married. They took us to, there are several Carnegie mansions on the island. One's burned down, but you can see the ruins, and the rest, are still standing. As a matter of fact, it's John F. Kennedy Jr. was there, I think in his late teens, with a Carnegie cousin, and realized when he was on Cumberland Island that that was the only place he'd ever been where paparazzi weren't chasing him, because it's this
Ah,
remote island. And
right.
so years later, when he and Carolyn decided to get married, he thought of Cumberland Island as the one really private place he'd ever been. So another connection to the Carnegie. So anyway, I did this Land and Legacy van tour, and that kind of whetted my appetite. And then there's only one hotel on the island called the Grayfield Inn, which is owned and run by a descendant of the Carnegies. And the first anniversary since my husband's death was coming up. And I thought, that's going to be a really hard day, and I need to do something special for myself. I'm going to, take myself on a little getaway. And I was thinking about, South Florida or,
Right.
somewhere like that. And I thought, no, I'm going to go and stay at the Grayfield Inn. So I took myself to the Grayfield Inn, which is not cheap. It's like $700
I'm
a
sure
night.
it is not.
And it's a fabulous place. And that price includes all your food and wonderful food. And if you're a writer doing research for a book set on Cumberland Island, it's a tax deduction.
Of course it is.
So I took myself to Cumberland Island and to the Grayfield Inn. And the book is set at the Ivy Lena Inn, which is a made-up inn. But,
Okay.
many of the practices and protocols of the Ivy Lena are what I saw at the Grayfield Inn.
Fantastic. I was going to ask you if the island, so reading the book, you fall in love with this island. Like, I wanted to go there right away. I wanted to just be on the island. Did it feel that way in person to you? Was it really kind of a magical place?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
The scene where Neena and Dwight are out in the forest walking around, that was the part that seemed most magical to me.
Yes.
The Grayfield Inn is a wonderful place too. I mean, I could move in there and live there. But you really got the feel of the island, out in the woods or watching the wild horses that live on the island.
Yeah. I mean, it really did. It had that kind of, I don't know, like magic feel to it. And part of it, of course, is knowing the history of the island, because I love history. And so knowing that there's this history to it, and then throw in that you can't get there unless you go on a ferry, which means that, now, I know you say you went on a legacy tour, but generally speaking, they don't have cars on the island. Is that correct?
There are about 50 residents on the island, and the residents can have cars, but when you take the ferry over, you either are walking or have a bicycle. That's the only way you can get on the island.
Right. You have, in the story, you have a character who everyone's afraid of, and he lives along the road, and he's kind of like a crazy guy. Is this a made up character, or did you actually hear of or meet some crazy person living on the island?
No, he's a made up character.
Okay.
He serves a particular
Yeah.
purpose in the plot, but he's a made up character.
Okay. I was just curious, because I can imagine if you were to live on an island like that, there would be a chance of being a little off your rocker. Like, you could, you know what I'm saying? Because you are kind of removed from society, or you can remove yourself.
So the people who own houses on the island, there are some people who the land has been in their family for generations.
Right.
But most of them have the last name of Carnegie.
Right.
Or another family that has land and houses there, the last name is Candler, which are the people who own the Coca-Cola fortune.
Okay.
So I don't know how many of the people who live there are full-time residents versus use it, as a second home.
And I suspect there's a lot of second home kind of. Yeah.
And most of the land, including that owned by the famous families, there's a sunset period when the last descendant passes away, and it's in the not too distant future. When that last person passes away, the land goes to the National Park Service, because most of the island is already a national seashore.
Okay.
And in the not too distant future, even the private holdings will go to the National Park Service.
Oh, that's very interesting tidbit there. All right. On your Amazon author profile, it states that you write about everyday heroes. So, why is that? What is it about an everyday hero, and what do you consider an everyday hero?
So I think there are everyday heroes around us everywhere. And I'm going to cry when I talk about this. I bet you never had anybody cry in your podcast.
That's great, though.
So,
No, I mean, because I love having a conversation where we're really talking about you and your book. And so this is fabulous.
so for example, I just saw on Facebook in my little community, a young mother posted a post about her 7-year-old son wants to learn how to fish. Was there anybody in the area who could teach him how to fish? And 22 people responded. Those are everyday heroes.
Right. Right.
So,
So,
and so many books, like in the romance genre, there's a whole trope about falling in love with the billionaire. Well, that just has no appeal to me whatsoever. And even superheroes don't have an appeal to me, because I believe that there are everyday heroes around us,
right.
and that those are the people that we want to read about, because I'm not going to walk out my front door today and run into Spider-Man, but I am going to, or a billionaire, but I am going to walk out my front door today and run into somebody who's done something heroic in a quiet manner.
Right. And it's those everyday heroes that actually make our world go round.
Right.
And I think all of us have the opportunity and often are that everyday hero to someone. Right. You and me, we could write a story about, I could write a story about you. You could write one about me. There are different aspects of our life that I look at and I think, it's just me being me. Right. Or it's just Sheila being Sheila.
Right.
But when others look at it, they see that special thing or that special quality, or they can say, you made a difference.
Right.
In someone's life, right?
And to me, when we read books, we pretend we become the protagonist.
Yes.
And so to me, that's kind of why billionaire romance or superheroes don't appeal to me, because it seems kind of far-fetched. And says the woman who wrote a book about JFK Jr. Ghost.
But even though it was a ghost story in quotes, like you said, he was John F. Kennedy Jr. He just happened to be dead.
Right.
But in terms of his personality, his charisma, the smile, his way of talking her into helping, all of those things would have been very true to who he was.
Right.
And so despite the fact that he's a ghost, he doesn't feel so much like a ghost, except that no one else can see him.
Right. Right.
So she, of course, believes she's delusional and is sure that this has something to do with all of her anxiety. And, she's thinking, great, I need to get back to my shrink.
Right.
But it doesn't feel like you said, it doesn't have that ghost story quality in terms of there's hauntings or scary or dark or any of those things.
Well, what I always tell people is that JFK Jr. can haunt my room anytime he
wants. Yes.
Welcome him.
Yeah, I can imagine so. When a reader is done with your book, other than having really enjoyed the story, what do you hope they walk away with?
A feeling that, I think the message of the book is you can't really know other people who are around you. Other people who are around you take actions that you may not always understand. Spouses, children, parents. So I think maybe a greater appreciation of cutting themselves some slack, that they don't, life's hard, and you need to not blame yourself the way that Neena blamed herself for the two deaths that occurred in her family.
Right. Right. And I think too there's just that idea that we can all stumble and we can all find ourselves in a bad place, in a bad patch in our life, but that you can move beyond that.
Right.
We see Neena, she's able to kind of pull herself back up and force herself back into life again.
Right.
And she succeeds.
Right.
She succeeds at it. And to be able to say, we all do that
Right.
we all are going to stumble and that we can come back as well. So
I also like that readers are taking away the fact that, Neena's 56, but that doesn't mean her life is over.
right.
She's very vibrant and very, I can't tell you how many reviews say, I'm so happy to read a book about a 50 something protagonist. I'm tired of reading about 20-year-olds.
Right.
So,
Right. And I think that kind of goes along with, I like having some older characters in my book as well. And I think that's part of it is, I'm a 60-year-old woman and I didn't write my first book until got it published when I was 58,
right.
And there was a point, I was in a really difficult relationship. I got out of that relationship, but when I did, I was definitely damaged. And I felt like my life was kind of over and that I was just going to have to kind of tread water until I died. And then something changed in my head and I thought, I need to prove to people that I've still got worth. And
Right.
it turns out that I just had to prove that to me.
Right.
No one else had that feeling. I'm the one that had that feeling. And so, yeah, I think that is wonderful to have that understanding that at 56, you're just getting started.
Right.
There isn't an end until you decide to end.
Right.
Right. In fact, I just interviewed not too long ago a woman who's 101. She is still writing. She began writing novels and novellas at the age of 80.
Wow.
And so I love that. I told her I wanted to grow up and be her.
Yeah.
Because she said, no, why would you stop? She said, I never wanted to sit in a rocking chair and knit.
Right.
She wanted to do things and she had this idea for a book. And so she wrote it. And yeah, I love that. I love that idea. Well, Sheila, what's next for you?
So I've got another book coming out September 17th.
Fantastic.
May Van Dorn's Perfect Storm.
Okay.
And it's set here in my area. It's set in Jacksonville Beach. And it's about a woman who, again, starts down on her luck. And even though she's very misanthropic, she just thinks the human race is not any good at all. She ends up taking a job as the personal assistant to the founder of the local mega church, which is a made up church, but
yeah.
And he's not nearly as Christian as you would think, but the people in his orbit through a series of events show her that there really is good in the human race.
So. Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm just curious, with the word storm in there, are we going to have a hurricane?
You just might.
You just might. I was thinking, you're at the coast of Florida. That sounds like a hurricane to me.
Yeah, we're, as a matter of fact, in about 2 weeks, hurricane starts. So
that's correct. Hurricane season, from June through October, if I remember correctly. I'm on the coast of North Carolina, so we also have the whole hurricane. In fact, there's a big hurricane expo. I think it's next weekend, where you go in and they teach people who are new to this area how to prepare themselves, their homes, what to have, what to buy before the hurricane, all those things, like what you should have now, so that when they start predicting the hurricane, you're not standing in line with everyone else,
right.
that you're already ready, then you know what you're going to do. So wonderful. Well, Sheila, is there anything you wish that I had asked you about Neena Lee is Seeing Things that I didn't ask?
No, I would just want to point out that it's available in print and ebook and audio.
Fantastic.
And you can order it online, or you can ask your local bookstore to order it for you, or ask your local library to get it into their collection.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I want to bring up to all the listeners is if you read Neena Lee is Seeing Things, please go review Neena Lee is Seeing Things. As authors, we really love reviews. And it's not just because we like to get the praise, it's because it really helps us with our books when people are leaving their reviews. So definitely get out there and review that. Sheila, where could someone reach you if they wanted to chat with you about Neena Lee, or if they wanted to chat with you about your new book coming out or writing? How do they get up with you?
So my website is kind of, communication central. It's Sheila, Sheila, Athens, Athens, just like the city in Greece, SheilaAthens.com.
Okay.
And I'm on both Facebook and Instagram as Sheila Athens Author.
Fantastic. And I'll have that in the show notes for everyone.
Okay.
So I want to thank you so much for being with me today. This has been fabulous. I enjoyed the book thoroughly, and I recommend everyone run right out and read it.
Well, thank you. It's been a fun afternoon to spend with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.